Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Kahinde Legal Haile, and I wish to thank the organizers of this forum for inviting us to share our mind and perspectives about elephants and captivity. Unlike my learned friend, the lawyer, I will take a policy analyst's point of view, and I will attempt to look at animal welfare considerations for elephants in captivity. He started off his talk by asking one of the questions is, can animals suffer? From a policy analysis point of view, I would actually ask, should animals suffer? Should elephants suffer? Now, here the theme of this forum is about taking elephants out of the room. Elephants are still in the room in many continents, whether it's in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in South America, they are still in the room. And here we are deliberating on how should we get them out of the room. One of the people who makes that decision is a policymaker. And it's the high time we begin looking and incorporating policymakers into these conversations going forward. Now, from an animal welfare perspective, captive areas not only limit the choices an animal has to make, but it actually denies them a chance to make that choice. And that's a very big problem that has been explained and illustrated by quite a lot of speakers, almost all speakers this morning. We have to agree, as much as we want to disagree, that elephant captivity is not a method of conservation. Many people will say they don't agree with that, but from what we can see happening to elephants in captivity, that might be a likely conclusion. We've heard from Joyce Poole to all the speakers about what happens to elephants in captivity, especially African elephants in other continents. And captivity is not about space. Elephants in captivity doesn't just talk about space. It denies animals the chance for social and environmental interaction. That is bad for animals. An animal, especially that lives for social interaction, as well as interacting with its environment, denying it that is a very big injustice to it. So we have had a lot, and our main conclusion is elephants don't fit in captivity. And if elephants don't fit in captivity, what should we actually be doing? An interesting scenario arises when we start thinking about whether and why we should always supply elephants to captive facilities, yet we know what they go through. The truth is, elephants in America and Europe cannot actually survive without constant supply of elephants from a place like Africa. Those populations are going down. A lot of them die. And in order to actually keep those populations up, they don't breed fast enough to keep the numbers at the levels at which those facilities can actually utilize them in the way they want. And this is where the demand for elephants, especially young elephants, come from. And that's why we're actually here. So the policymaker comes in a very awkward position. In the talk we are having, the policymaker is a stakeholder, but at the same time, the policymaker is a shareholder in regulating and benefiting from the proceeds of sale for these young elephants. So how does he or she fit into this whole conversation? I would like to put forth the following statements for consideration by policymakers. First, capturing young elephants for export to zoos should never happen. It shouldn't happen. Knowing what we know about what happens during and after the capture, no one in their right mind would actually advocate for that. Which brings us to the next question. We should find methods, especially ex situ methods, for supplying what those zoos want. I have seen a couple of papers that are now showing elephants in zoos being fertilized with frozen sperm. I have seen that. And those are sperm taken from wild elephants. I consider extracting sperm not as traumatic as actually capturing an elephant and actually taking it over to Europe. Those alternatives, we must be able to think about them and provide our policy thinkers with options that they can actually come up with structures for. Consideration number 3 is that there are already elephants in captivity. What are we going to do about them? We've been reading about standards for animals in captivity, and I was particularly attracted to elephants that work in Myanmar, where the welfare conditions are even regulated by government. Those elephants work during the day. At night, they are let to go into the forest to interact with others and eat. They have a day off once a week. They have annual leave. They have maternity leave. And they even have mandatory retirement age. Those are the kind of things perhaps we should be thinking of, especially for elephants already in captivity. I've already said there shouldn't be any international movement of elephants, especially from Africa to Europe. But facilities that already have elephants should be looked at in a new eye. And I'm talking about elephants, whether they're in zoos or whether they are in circuses or whether they are being rehabilitated. Joyce Poole earlier on said that Kenya is a good example, where we have 2 captive facilities for elephants that are a model. I tend to be skeptical about that because those 2 facilities, nobody knows about what happens to the elephants when they are released into the wild. I have a project around a place called Tsavo, and we are seeing a lot of elephants that are knowing how to break into houses and actually steal maize and maize flour from kitchens. We suspect they must have been released from a captive facility like David Sheldrick. But there's no data, and there's no evidence. I've had many stories about elephants released from captive places, and that we should start thinking about. My point here is we should consider whether to release elephants that have lived in captivity into the wild. Thinking about the wild, where are these wilds? Those wilds are diminishing, and to a very large extent, they have actually stopped existing. We have fragments of them. So the cliche that we should keep elephants in the wild should also be looked at critically, because those wilds are not there. I would rather say that let's keep elephants as natural as we can. If we release an elephant, let's probably keep them in natural large paddocks or sanctuaries, that they can actually exercise natural behavior. Because those wilds that we keep thinking about don't exist. And in places where we seem to think they exist, they are actually sprawling to where people live.